Hey folks, welcome to the second guitar video here. We're going to learn our first chords today. Important that you have your course book with you, or that you've read it at least. Actually, you should probably have it with you because there's a couple things you're going to want to note in there. Before you watch this video, I'd like you to make sure you read page 2 and 3. It talks about the left hand and chord diagrams. I'll be explaining a little bit of that, but it'll help you a lot if you've read those. So if you need to pause for a second and reach page 2 and 3, that's great. So page 2 talks a lot about posture. We're going to do a lot more of that in class. You don't need to worry about too much right now. Be aware of sitting up straight and try not to have too much tension anywhere in your body, but that's something that's a lot easier to show in class. One thing you should know from page 2 is on your left hand here, you have 4 numbers on your fingers. So your index finger is going to be number 1, middle finger number 2, ring is 3, and pinky is 4. Those are going to correspond to the chord diagrams, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Okay, so those numbers are going to help tell you which finger you put where on the neck. Also frets, we talked about this a little bit in the tuning video. The frets are the metal pieces in the neck here, and each fret, this first one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, going up the neck. And that's something to get familiar with. Even though my headstock here is pointing up, so directionally I'm going up, this is up the neck because we're always talking about pitch when we're talking about guitar. I want you to really reinforce that, pitch. So to finger on a note, you're going to put your finger and press down just behind the fret you want to play. So this would be open, but just in front of, or just behind the first fret, that's where I play the first fret. Okay? So I think we're ready to go. The chord diagrams, as you'll have read in page 3, show your 6 strings. They kind of actually look like this. If you were to hold your guitar up like this, you have all your strings, 6 strings, and then you usually have just the first 2, 3, 4 frets. And for the open chords, that's all we're going to use. Those first, really the first 3 frets is all we're going to use for these open chords. So make sure you understand, have a good understanding of how to read a chord diagram, and we'll get going with D. On your screen now, you should have the chord diagram for D. It should also be there on page 12. Now page 12 just has the dots where you put your fingers. It does not have the fingerings. And part of the reason for that is a lot of chords can have multiple different fingerings. I'm going to try to make you aware of the different fingerings that are commonly used. And really, it just has to do with which chords you're going to, which chords you're coming from, what you prefer. So I'll try to make you aware of the most common ones, what I think are the most easy, but what I think are the most easy doesn't necessarily mean it's what you think will be the most easy. For D and A7 though, there's pretty standard fingerings. So D, I want you to take your fingers 1 and 2, and you almost just curve them a little bit. The first finger is going to go on the G string at the 2nd fret. So 3rd string, E, B, G, and then 2nd fret, open 1, 2. Now your 2nd finger, your middle finger, is going to go on the 1st string, the high E string, also at the 2nd fret. So you've left a gap there on the B string. And that's where your 4th finger is going to go, but it's not going to go on the 3rd fret, or it's not going to go on the 2nd fret, it's going to go on the 3rd fret. When you're doing this, you want to make sure your fingers are nice and curved and the tips are pressing down. Your D string is going to be open. That's the 4th string, E, B, A, D. But your A and E stay open, but you're going to try to not play them. If you hit the A a little bit, it's fine. But the E won't sound so great when you're playing the D chord. So mainly we're just playing the top 4 strings. So for now, you can use your thumb, you can use any of your fingers, you can use a pick if you want. We're not going to worry too much about the right hand until another lesson or two. We're just going to focus on getting some good sounds. So try your best at the D chord right now. Just play it a couple times. might get a sound that sounds something like this. So that D is opening, is ringing nice and loud, but the rest are kind of muted. First thing to check is if you're close enough to the frets. You want to be just behind the fret that you're trying to play, as a general rule. You don't have to be right there all the time, but if you're getting muted strings, that's one thing to check first. So try that and try again. The other thing to check is, are your fingers curved enough? Okay? Because if I've got my fingers like this, that's actually my third finger that's muting the high E string. Even though it's not playing the high E string, it's kind of collapsed down onto the E string. And then the last thing to check is, are you pressing hard enough? A lot of people try that first. They try to just press harder and harder. And a lot of times that's not what you want to have, because that's just going to cramp up your hand. And usually something else will fix that. But if you try the other things and you are still getting muted strings, or sometimes you get a buzz like this. Sometimes that's better with the lower strings. You hear that kind of double note, that buzz. So you got that. That's all going to be fixed by getting closer to the frets, by checking to see if your fingers are curved, and lastly by pressing harder. Alright, so just try to strum a couple Ds with me here. Alright, very nice. So the next chord we're going to do is A7. The only thing you need to do with A7, if you have your D down, hopefully you practice that a little bit, take your first two fingers and you're going to move them each over one string to a lower string. So the second finger is now going to be on the B string, and the first finger is now going to be on the D string. Okay? We now can play that A string, that open A string that we were trying to avoid before. You're still going to try to avoid the E string. If you hit it a little bit, not a big deal. It's going to sound all right, but still try to avoid it. And our third finger doesn't do anything now, so you can lift that up. So A7 should sound like this. Alright, and again, check all the same things that we did before. Are you close to the frets? Are your fingers curved? Are you pressing hard enough? And strum a couple A7s with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright. Now if you noticed, our first two fingers stay in the exact same position, they just move over one string. So that's part of the reason we're doing D and A7 first, because it should be really easy to switch between them. So go back to your D, and then try, just before you even play, try switching over to A7. So I just move my two fingers over one string and lift up. Now it might be difficult at first, but you want to try to get those two fingers to move together. A lot of people do this. They play and they lift everything up and then they kind of walk them over 1, 2. That's not going to be the most efficient thing. So try to move them together. They stay right together because they're going to be in the exact same position when they get over to the A7. So D, move those fingers over and lift the third finger up. Here's A7. And just try to switch back and forth a couple times. Now you might have been getting a good sound before, and now you find that they're muted again. And that's just part of adding something new in there, so we'll need to practice that a little bit. So practice until you can get that switch relatively quick. And once you feel like you've got it pretty well, see if you can just do it by feel without actually looking at your hand. It seems weird at first, but if you get in the habit of that now, it's going to make your life a lot easier. It shouldn't be that you never look at your left hand, but you should try to get in the feel of just doing it by feel. Alright, so the next step is to try to go back and forth between the D and A7 in time, so while you're strumming. So it takes a little more coordination, so make sure that you've got just this back and forth down to the point where you can kind of do it all seamlessly. You don't have to think about it too much as you're going back and forth. So we're going to do 8 beats on each one right now. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A7. 5, 6, 7. Switch. 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 And stop. So if right now you're taking like a beat to switch, try to switch on that 8th beat. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2. Because it's always better to stay in time, but maybe have a little gap, or maybe have a little part where you're. I would always rather hear a spot where the chord's not ringing fully, but you're staying right on beat than this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And having that pause where you switch, because eventually you will get faster with the switch, but if you get in the habit of stopping every time you need to switch, that's going to be a bad habit that you get into. So try to keep that beat going and do that. We're going to do progression B, which is basically what we were just doing, but now we're just going to do 4 beats. So on page 13, you can look at there, and it says D, A7, D, A7. It's kind of got 3 dashes after each one. So D is 1 beat, dash, dash, dash is 2, 3, 4, and then you've got your A7. So let's try that. 4 beats each. 1, 2, 3, 4. And switch. 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 It's pretty simple. So the things to practice are really those first 2 progressions, A and B, which is really the 2 ones that we did. We're going to go over A just one more time because it starts out with 4 beats of D, then you have 8 beats of A7, and then 4 beats of D. But when you repeat, it's kind of like the thing that we just did with 8 beats of each. So let's just do progression A twice through. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Switch. Now 8 beats on A7. And D. Now we repeat D again. Switch. Switch back to D. And that's it. So if you can play those 2 progressions at tempo, but a slow tempo, and you can show me the fingerings between D and A7, and show that you can switch. It doesn't have to be perfect yet, but that you can go back and forth. You're ready for class. All right, I'll see you in class.